All right, Mike, you're all set.
Okay, good morning. I would like to call the meeting to order. It is 9:01 a.m. Stephanie, would you please take attendance?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Ava Bermuda Zimmerman,
Present.
Ellen McKitterick,
Present.
David Salazar Austin,
Present.
Mike Soltis,
Present.
and Holly Williams.
Present.
All right, thank you. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. I would like to welcome and thank the members of the public who are joining us this morning. First item on the agenda is to review and approve the minutes of our December 3rd meeting. I'd ask the committee for a review and a motion to approve.
Motion, so moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an update regarding proposed revisions to the private plan policies and procedures. Michael, would you please lead us in that discussion?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen quickly.
You can see your screen, Michael.
Perfect. Thank you. So the committee may remember about 2 months ago, we had recommended changes to the private plan policies and procedures. The primary purpose of that change was to address the enhancement of safe leave in the legislative session in 2024. But we also took that opportunity to make a couple other adjustments, including adding a little more flexibility to employers who want to return to the public program, as well as a few other minor edits, nothing too controversial. So the notice and comment period basically went from the end of November to the end of December, and it has closed. There were 2 revisions that came from that notice and comment period, neither of them sort of really meaningful, more wordsmithing just for clarity. So just walk through those really quickly here. We had added language, actually as a result of Molly's suggestion in the board meeting, about having an obligation on the part of an employer, should they move from the private plan to the public program, of notifying their employees of that change and that they can file for paid leave requests from the authority rather than from the private plan carrier. One of the recommendations was to add the word date to the sentence. So that underlined bolded word is just sort of clarifying that, you know, it's after the termination date that they can make those new requests to the public program. Very similar. We had a reference in the second item is a reference in the plain language guide to the amount that employees are allowed to contribute towards the private plan. Sort of we were missing a noun in the sentence, so we just previously had said employees contribute 1/2 of 1% up to the Social Security contribution and benefit-based pay. We just added the word of their earnings to be clear what we mean by 1/2 of 1%. So as I said, neither of those are really changing the intent at all of any language, and there were no other comments or questions for the policy. So the goal would be in this Thursday's board meeting to officially adopt the revisions to the policies. But in the meantime, if there's any questions, comments from the committee today, happy to address them.
Okay, any questions or comments for Michael? Seems pretty straightforward. Hey, Ava.
I agree that it's pretty straightforward, but I'm just curious to see, I think you mentioned it, but no one made a comment from the public when it was open?
Correct.
Cool, thank you.
We get a question from an insurance carrier that led to the date change, but they didn't want to officially make it a comment. They just sort of asked the question. So it came from the public, but yeah, there was no real meaningful comments from the public.
Thank you.
Hey, seeing no other hands up. So you don't need any action from us?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any changes you want to see, if you want me to go through any of the policies, happy to do so, but there's no sort of official vote that's necessary in this committee meeting.
Okay. So why don't we move to item number 4, policy priorities for 2025, and you could keep the floor.
Nice. Thank you again. So because it's the beginning of the year, we just wanted to sort of take this opportunity to talk about some of the things we're looking to do in the upcoming year. So these are sort of policies that we are aware that we need to have some work done, and we'd like to have them have it occur in 2025. The first item is basically wrapping up a couple of things that we worked on at the end of last year, including the private plan policies. So hopefully officially adopting those this Thursday. We also have the changes to the employee handbook that is currently in the notice and comment period. So that should hopefully be able to get adopted in the February board meeting. We also have identified a couple other policies that we'd like to take a look at. The bylaws are required. We have in the bylaws that we will review the bylaws every 3 years and potentially make any changes as necessary. The last time the bylaws were updated was November of 2022. So at some point during this year, we'd like the authority to look at it. We'd also like the board to look at the bylaws to make sure there's no changes that are necessary. At the same time, it makes sense to do the similar process for the plan of operations, since those sort of go hand in hand. So at some point this year, we're going to address those. The next item is potentially new, potentially revision, depending on where it ends up being located. But we'd like to enhance our conflict of interest policy. We already have a couple of references conflicts of interest, both in the state's code of ethics as well as the authority's own code of ethics. However, those are a little bit more specific to financial situations, and if you own a company, can that company do business with the authority, kind of thing. What we'd like to do to enhance the policy is talk about maybe some of the non-financial changes that might also be a conflict. For example, if your best friend growing up, has some business with the authority, you might not have financial interest in that, but maybe you have some sort of feelings one way or the other about that. Or your neighbor who you don't get along with has an issue with the authority. Particularly in situations where there's discretion on our part, waiving penalties, maybe addressing appeals for, requests for paid leave that go to the Department of Labor. We want to make sure that employees are actually doing their job and not taking their own personal opinions or history into account. So we just want to make sure that we have, a robust policy to ensure that when we're making decisions, when we have discretion, that the authority is making those decisions in our day-to-day lives for the right reasons. So we'll figure out some of the details and exactly where it goes. But, one of the things we want to do is identify sort of where there are those moments where discretion can be exercised by the authority, and where do we want to make sure that we always have, if someone has a conflict, do we have a backup for them? So there's not a single person who's responsible for that role. So more to come on the specifics of that, but that's one of the policies we'd like to add this year. In addition, we'd like to potentially revise our private plan audit guide. We've now been doing private plan audits for about 2 years. So we've got some lessons learned, and we'll look to address some of the things we ask for as part of those audits. Another new item is, and we'll figure out where this goes, is relates to third parties' ability to file or deal with paid leave claims. It's come up a couple of times when an individual is incapacitated or has passed away. Wonder what circumstances can someone else sort of act on their behalf when it comes to paid leave claims. Obviously, if they filed a third-party authorization form, that does allow that. But if it's sort of a sudden, unexpected situation, they didn't have the opportunity, and maybe there isn't the ability to have a power of attorney paperwork, what sort of other situations would we allow for someone to file a claim for another person? And so we don't have worked out exactly what those details will be, but it is something that we'd like to address at some point during this year. And then the last identified policy that we'd like to address is, in our statutes, we actually have a reference to private plans and about the approval of private plans, that that approval must not result in substantial selection of risks averse to the Family Medical Leave Insurance Trust or otherwise significantly endanger the solvency of the fund. I don't think we're anywhere close to private plans being at risk to the solvency of the fund, but if before we get there, it makes sense for us to build those rules about, when will we consider those plans to be a risk to the solvency of the fund? What point will that occur? And if it does occur, what does that mean? What plans do get approved? What plans don't get approved? So we'd like to explore a little bit before we actually run into this issue, what rules we want to build around whether we need to deny private plans at some point in the future due to a risk related to the solvency of the fund. Those are the ones we sort of know we'd like to work on. Obviously, other things may come up during the year. And obviously, if the committee has any policies that you'd like us to add, revise, take a look at, I'm happy to do so. Whether you have the idea now or at some point during the year, you decide we want to look into something, we're happy to do so.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Any questions or comments about the policy priorities for this year? Okay, seeing none. Let's move to the next item, which is a discussion and vote on the duration and frequency of meetings. Aaron, will you please lead our discussion?
Sure. So everyone has seen the slides from December a few times now, so I'm not going to pull those up again. But the basic question is, how often does the committee choose to meet? The board voted in December that the board meetings should continue to be monthly. Finance and audit decided that they felt it was important to continue to meet monthly because of a lot of the deadlines that finance and audit have, and just the nature of the work that they do. Outreach and engagement, on the other hand, said their deadlines, they don't tend to have deadlines, and they tend to be looking at bigger picture items, and so they felt they could meet every other month. So now it's your turn. Policy and personnel has some deadlines, right? So we do want to get your input in our development of policies, and then we have liked to bring any public comments back to you before we bring them to the board. But, you know, we also want to be respectful of your time, particularly since you all are on multiple committees. So we really just want to give you the opportunity to let us know what you think the best cadence is.
All right, any thoughts?
For my part, I think monthly makes sense. I mean, it's not really a huge time commitment for, as it is. These meetings often don't even last the full hour. I'm sure there's a case for bi-monthly, but I think I would favor monthly.
Eva?
When it comes to deadlines, could you tell us, Aaron, any particular annual deadlines that have to happen? Because I don't think there are any, but clarify if there is.
Yeah,
And-
so nothing on an annual basis, unlike the budget, which we have built in. The deadlines I was talking about were more just the policy adoption process in terms of
And the time,
things out for the public comment.
which I think in this committee, we've probably dealt with scenarios like that maybe 4 times.
In terms of getting comment back and then wanting to make revisions, yeah. In the early days, right, when everything was brand new, we got a lot more public comment. As we've moved along and now we're kind of tweaking, we get less public comment, but I think if we were to do kind of a wholesale revision of the claims procedures, I would expect comments. I expect comments on the private plan solvency issue. So I think it's really just a matter of kind of what topics we address.
My recommendation is to align with the outreach and engagement meeting schedule. Have 2 committee meetings meeting at the same time and the other committee meetings meeting at the same time. I don't think the frequency of monthly is necessary, and if we're meeting bi-monthly, we should have more than enough time for staff to do their due diligence with the deadlines that are initiated for policy changes. And most of the time the staff are aware and gives us a heads up when policy changes are needed. So there is ample time there to make sure that we're providing the schedule to the community on a timely basis. I don't think that we've ever, I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I guess my question is, and it's on the same topic, Michael, since you draft these policies and shepherd them through, would going to bi-monthly it all interfere or be an impediment to our processing these policies efficiently and effectively?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's one way that it definitely would be make it take significantly longer. I think, and Aaron, I think you had the examples in your presentation, but it's sort of if we do, I think the opposite month from the board meeting, that would end up adding a significant amount of time because it would just sort of lead to longer gaps between talking to you guys and then talking to the full board. That can potentially, but I think if it's in the same month, then it doesn't meaningfully extend the period of time that it takes to adopt a policy. The only other thing to think about is if we ever have issues with a quorum and we aren't able to meet in a specific month and we don't have another meeting scheduled until sort of 2 months from then, it could in theory add to the time it takes to adopt a policy. That has not been an issue, and we don't have the same sort of threshold that we do for the full board where we need 2/3 of the members to be present to even adopt a policy. When it comes to committee, as long as we have a quorum, we can talk about it. So both of those are factors to consider, but I don't think they, even if we went with the every other month, it's not an obstacle we can't overcome. It just would take a little bit longer.
All right, so if we went with every other month, it should be the months in which the board meets.
Well, the board will always meet. That's the good news.
You're right.
That's right.
The one other scenario I think where we could see a delay, Ava alluded to, we don't have it happen as much now, but it could happen depending on the policies we adopt, is if we get public comment. So we have to post our policies in the Connecticut Law Journal. The Connecticut Law Journal has a cadence by which you have to get their notices out. So if we go to the board and say, please give us approval to post this policy, that happens on a Thursday. We have to notify the Law Journal by Wednesday that we want to be in their following week's issue. So because our board meetings happen on Thursdays, we can't get into the deadline for the next week. So there's already like a 2-week delay. So Thursday happens, we get the notice, or we get approval to post the notice, we notify the Law Journal. The following week, then the following week it gets posted. Then 30 days from that, we have the deadlines for the comments. If we get comments that we want to bring back to the committee, potentially significant revisions, or we want to, pull a policy like we did a couple of years ago with regard to, what happens when a private plan terminates. We tend to have those discussions at the committee level before we bring it to the board. So if the committee is meeting every other month, that does add the potential for a pretty significant delay. It's a low frequency risk, but it's just something that happens. The way to mitigate that risk would be for the committee to say, well, if that really happens, you could always go to the full board without stopping here first. But, we like working with you guys on revisions. So I think we'd want to work with the committee in those situations. So again, it's a low frequency risk, but it has happened, and that is something to be aware of. They tend not to disrupt operations. We've been able to work it out so that we can continue to do our business. It just means that we, sometimes it'll take longer to get these policies adopted.
And if we were to go to every other month and one of those situations were to arise where it would be helpful to have a meeting that's not scheduled, do we have the ability to schedule a
Yes.
special meeting?
Yep. Yeah, we can always schedule a special meeting.
And how big a deal is it to do that?
The most difficult part of scheduling a special meeting is finding time on everybody's calendars.
Huh.
So, you know, we've certainly done it. I know there is a concern too that members of the public who may be interested, you know, get used to a certain cadence, and therefore if we have a special meeting, they may not see it, but every special meeting gets posted in multiple places. So, you know, it's certainly doable. And as you say, if we had an exceptional circumstance where we needed to meet, we could absolutely do that.
Okay, any other thoughts? Anybody want to make a motion? How about if I make a suggestion? How about if we, for 2025, try every other month, realizing we have the opportunity to have a special meeting if we need it, and revisit this issue at our last meeting in 2025 to evaluate, did it work? Did it not work? Should we go back to monthly or stick with bi-monthly?
Is your motion to change the meeting schedule and the frequency? And then if in fact it works out, then we're good. And then if in fact it doesn't, then we vote at another time, change the frequency back?
Yes, giving it a 1-year probation. A 1-year, yes, revisiting it at the end of 25 for 26.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Thanks, David. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. So now the next question is, when is our next meeting? 2 months from,
So right, so
March.
if you want to do it bi-monthly, then we would skip February and
Right.
just do January, March, May, which has the value of having one meeting in the summer and no December meeting, which tend to be low population meetings anyway.
okay. Okay, so do we need a revised schedule to be sent out, or?
We can do
Okay.
that. I do see
Would-
Ava's hand up.
I know that we already voted. I just wanted to make sure that this new frequency puts us in alignment with the board meetings. Does this put us?
Yeah, so this is the board is meeting every month.
Yeah.
And this is the same as outreach and engagement, which is
That's- okay.
meeting January, March, May.
Thank-
Okay, thank you. Moving on, is there any old business anyone would like to discuss? Seeing none, any new business anyone would like to discuss? Okay, we get to our last item. May I have a motion to adjourn? Everybody wants to stay together today.
So moved, Holly.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the motion is adjourned, the meeting is adjourned. It is 9:25. Thank you very much for your time this morning, and we'll see you in March.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.